I saw a post on Instagram the other day by OBO Jones that said, leave what other people think of you in their head. It doesn't belong in yours. Now, I love this sentiment, of course, but that's hard, especially for a recovering people pleaser like me or perfectionist. What other people think determines what a people pleaser or a perfectionist think about themselves and others, and ultimately determines how they show up and how they behave in the world. It results in a lack of authenticity, disconnection, and self-doubt. And those are just a few of the consequences of chasing perfection. So, what do we do about it? Well, today I want to talk about us embracing the gift of imperfection. Welcome to Here We Are, the mindful podcast for millennials, where it's all about remembering where we've been, knowing where we're going, and taking up space in the present through the art of storytelling. I'm your host, Teka, and I'll tie together the practice of presence, mental health nuggets, life lessons, and some faith as well. Whether sharing my own story or featuring a special guest, I hope you receive what you need from this story and that you're inspired to take control of your story and take control of your life. Don't forget to check out the show notes for any links that I referenced today, and be sure to rate and review. I really appreciate it. You ready? Let's journey. So my story today starts with me referencing a post that I made on Facebook. The other day, I posted like a status or like a little mini blog on my Facebook page about my journey with acne. Now, from the video, if you're watching the visual, I beat my face, right? I could have came on here with no makeup on, but I beat my face today. I wanted to feel good, look good. But underneath this, there are scars, hyperpigmentation, even a couple of blemishes, pimples, zits, blackheads, whiteheads, whatever you want to call it. And I've pretty much dealt with acne since I was an adolescent, since puberty, right? Something that I inherited from the paternal side of my family. My mom's side of the family has beautiful skin, and I sometimes am quite jealous. But my journey with my acne, it has gone up and down, ebbs and flows, highs and lows. I'll never forget one time I was so desperate. It was my senior year of college, and I was stressed to the max because I had a full course load. I had 2 jobs, an internship, and I was the president of my chapter of my sorority at school at the time. This was my second term being president. And so if you can imagine, there were a lot of responsibilities. There were a lot of expectations, and not only those that others had of me, but some that I was placing on myself, some that I learned growing up, others that maybe started to develop based on what I saw others may have deemed as worthy or valuable. It's the one who's succeeding. It's the one who is the leader. It's the one who is making the great grades and who is well connected, who is succeeding according to whatever the standards are at the time, the one who is still beautiful, who has a banging body, who's ready to party, but who's also humble, like a lot. And so because of all of those standards, I was stressed to the max, to the point that I was experiencing what someone called like cystic acne. So it was painful. And so my senior year of college, I remember I was in Florida with my best friend, and we were down there for spring break. And I was like, okay, I am to the point where this is so painful, not only physically, but also emotionally, because I knew people were staring at me. And I knew people may have been thinking, well, take that back. I didn't know what people were thinking, but I thought that people were thinking a lot of negative things about me. because it was also a reflection of what I was thinking about myself, that I wasn't beautiful, that I wasn't desirable, that I was hideous, that I was, the less pretty or gorgeous friend in the friend group. And so I remember calling my mom while I was on spring break with my best friend, states away. And I'm crying, I'm sobbing because I'm like, Mom, I just want to get rid of this. I feel like it is keeping me from feeling confident. I feel like it is making me less desirable. That's why I'm single. This is something that makes me feel like I am not who I'm supposed to be. I'm not perfect. I'm not who I should be. And that should probably tore me up back then because it made me think that I had to reach this ideal or be this ideal version of myself. And I'm sure some people can relate, right? I should be doing this. I should have that. I should have accomplished this by now. And so, I'm going through the stores and I find myself in a beauty supply store where they had African black soap. And I remember I was on the phone with my mom and I was like, I'm going to try this because we had tried everything, right? We have tried Proactive, acne free, natural stuff, Noxzema, Clean and Clear? I think it was back then. All the things, right? And so I was like, all right, I'm going to try African black soap. Worst mistake of my life. That soap literally dried my face out to the point where the bumps were even more painful, but then they were peeling. Anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I said all that to say that I was feeling very vulnerable. And I was with my best friend, and I often, feel like even now in adulthood, only my closest friends probably have seen me at my most vulnerable, right? And, disclaimer, not everybody deserves the most vulnerable parts of you and to see that and have access to it. So there are certain things that only my close group of friends have been able to witness and be present for. But I know that when I felt like that vulnerability would put me in a position to feel imperfect or in a position to be judged or to be seen as less than. And these are all unhealthy beliefs, right? I'm making this up in my head, but I thought that was what I had to combat. So I'm like, all right, well, clear skin equals confidence and femininity, hair that's put together equals someone who's successful and has their life together. The way that you dress and the way you show up on social media means that you're successful and you're a leader and you're an expert and you're creative and all these things. I was equating almost everything to my skin and my physical appearance, but also what I could do. So when people say, oh, I don't, what people think of me, it doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. But where it becomes an unhealthy belief or where it becomes unhealthy is when we take it on and we take on what we believe other people may think about us, and it becomes what we think about ourselves. I remember last week or 2 weeks ago, you may already have witnessed it. Sarah Jakes Roberts, she is Bishop T.D. Jakes' daughter, but in her own right, she is an amazing preacher, pastor, motivational speaker, podcaster, author. She's just down to earth. And she was preaching a message on Sunday where her wig came off. It was sliding back. I feel like that was none but the Holy Spirit. That was the glory. Pushing her wig back. And it was sliding back so much to the point where she was like, forget this, and snatched it off, right? In the moment, she is like in the zone. She's in the spirit. She's like, I'm just focused on making sure I can get this word to God's people. But afterwards, she and her husband went on Instagram Live like a couple days after that. I want to say like Monday or Tuesday after that Sunday. And she shared that she was experiencing a vulnerability hangover because that was a moment where she wasn't seen as perfect. Sarah Jakes Roberts, her hair almost always looks good. Well, always looks good. Face be beat. Style is amazing. And so even though that doesn't make her, the impactful and influential pastor, preacher, change maker that she is, it is a part of what people may see and identify with in her. And so when her wig slid back and she snatched it off, her husband said that that was a moment where it was almost like them tearing down the idol of perfectionism. Because for so many women, I'm speaking from the perspective of being a woman, we don't feel like ourselves if we appear flawed or imperfect. Keep it real. There are moments where we don't want to get out of bed. We don't want to go out into public if our flaws are showing or our imperfections are visible. If what we believe are our personal inadequacies are something that other people can see and judge, right? Jasmine Sullivan's song. That's why I never leave the house without makeup on. I keep mascara in my pocket when I run into the market because you never know who's watching you, right? We've built this idol around looking and appearing to have it all together, to be perfect. I have fell victim to it. But that has created an impossible, unrelenting standard of perfectionism to the point where now people, men and women alike, men, women in between, are walking around not as themselves, inauthentic, walking around guarded, maybe even walking around as a version of themselves that is not aligned with who they're really destined to be. So Sarah and her husband, Pastor Torrey Roberts, they're talking about how for women, their hope is that they can feel like they can still be seen and taken seriously, be seen as powerful and desirable in the total package, even if they are imperfect, because it's not about necessarily the outward appearance. It's about their heart posture. It's about their purpose, their passion. It's about how they touch other people. And so that's where the title of this episode comes in, the gift of imperfection, right? And this is from Brené Brown's book, Dr. Brené Brown, one of my superheroes in the social work world. Her book, The Gifts of Imperfections, which I think is like 13 years old now. That is where the title of this episode comes from. In that book, she touches on the topic of how to embrace imperfection and see it as a gift. Now, one of the things I want to make sure that I share is that embracing imperfection is not about not dressing up, not wearing makeup. It's more so about undoing the belief system that our worth and value is connected to our body image or our social media posts or our academic or career accomplishments. Our value and worth is not connected to our performance and productivity. Our value and worth is not connected to our perfectionism. Our value and worth is not connected to what other people think of us. Of course, being vulnerable is scary and it's a risk. Being seen as imperfect is vulnerable, but it's worth it because it connects us, right? No one on earth is perfect. And I'm not sure why we are walking around with this belief that I got to be perfect because everybody else is too. Really, if we were to say, let me go ahead and embrace my imperfections and inadequacies because I am not alone, I'm sure the world will be a much easier place to navigate and live on. So, how can we release what we believe is enough? How can we release what we believe is perfection? How can we shine light? Ding, 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 ding. On the power of authenticity, and how can we receive the gift of imperfection and how it can remove the darkness of shame? Brené Brown highlights 3 C's in her book: courage, compassion, and connection. Being vulnerable takes courage, right? So that's the first C. It doesn't go without saying that when it's time for us to show up as our full, authentic, unapologetic self, that is not going to be scary. It literally means that we are putting ourselves out there and we are risking and being opened to disappointment, but we are also risking or opening ourselves up to deep connection. So, embracing the gift of imperfection takes courage because being vulnerable takes courage. The second C is compassion. The heart of compassion is acceptance, right? But it also requires boundaries. It doesn't mean that we just accept the way that people may hurt us, right? I want to make that clear. Acceptance isn't about saying, okay, whatever happens to me or whatever people do to me, I'm just going to go along with it. It's more so about saying, hey, if you do or say something that hurts me, offends me, insults me, violates me, I'm going to share with you how that impacted me. And I'm also going to set a boundary. Compassion is also about self-compassion. So that's where the acceptance of self comes in. Brené Brown's message about compassion is that all of us need to be more mindful of how we act towards ourselves. Furthermore, she suggests taking a balanced approach to our negative emotions so that these feelings are neither exaggerated nor suppressed. So when you may feel a negative or uncomfortable emotion towards yourself, don't negate it. Don't ignore it. Don't avoid it. Don't numb it out. Accept it, but don't let it consume you. Being mindful, this is a mindful podcast. Being mindful requires us to hold back from identifying with our emotions, meaning in layman's terms, it means saying, I feel anxious or I feel sad or I feel disappointed versus I am anxious. I am sad. I am disappointed. It may seem very nuanced and very trivial, but that word I feel versus I am can make all the difference. And the third C is connection. We as human beings on this earth are social creatures, right? You're listening to this podcast or watching the visual because you're socializing with me in a sense. That's the beauty of the virtual world. We can socialize now in very creative ways. And we want to feel connected. We want to be seen. We want to belong. We need to be loved and accepted and to belong. However, for so long, I think people have confused fitting in with belonging. The difference is that fitting in is about assessing a situation and then being a chameleon, becoming whatever you feel like you need to be accepted. That's where it means to fit in. And literally think of the words. Think of like, you know, the statement, oh, you can't fit a square peg in a round hole. Fitting in means that square peg is going to shave off its edges in order to fit in that round hole. You're losing part of yourself in order to fit in. Now, belonging, on the other hand, does not require us to change who we are. Doesn't require us to become a chameleon, to lose and betray parts of ourselves, to hide and suppress, to wear a mask. It requires us to just be who we are. Now, these 3 C's are not just something that happen in a vacuum. They are a part of what Brené Brown calls wholehearted living, but it's not easy. There is sometimes a barrier to this wholehearted living, and I can relate to the barrier. That barrier is shame. Shame convinces us that we're not worthy and that our stories, our authenticity is going to drive people or scare people away. It's going to cause people to think less of us, and it's ultimately going to leave us alone and isolated. That is what shame does. Shame's all about fear, right? It's something that pokes at or draws on the fear that people won't like us if they see our truth, if they see our inadequacies, our imperfections, our flaws. It is that fear that if we were to share the truth about our story, where we come from, what we believe, how much we're struggling, Even if what we're soaring or thriving or what is wonderful that's going on with us, some of us minimize. Now let's talk about that. Some of us minimize and shrink ourselves in order to be accepted. Some of us make ourselves smaller in order to appease others because we don't want them to think that we're cocky, arrogant, boastful. If I'm too much, then I'm not enough for you. So one of the things that I think we also have to remember is that shame doesn't just like come and go. Shame thrives on a couple of things. And one of the things that shame thrives on, think about it, it's like feeding on. Yum, 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 yum. Shame feeds on and gets fat off of secrecy, silence, and judgment. When something shaming, quote unquote, happens, we keep it locked up and it festers, it grows, and it eventually consumes us. When you don't share your story, when you don't show up as your authentic, full, unapologetic, flawed, imperfect, but uniquely beautiful self, you are keeping all of that in silence, in secrecy, and ultimately in judgment of self. So we can kind of create some resilience to shame because life is going to life. Things are going to happen, right? Whether it is something that's happened in our past that we may want to keep hidden, whether it's the way that we feel about ourselves today, shame is something that we can build or proactively help ourselves cope with and build resilience towards. How do we do that? One of my favorite words, hope. Hope is not an emotion. Hope is a mindset, right? Hope is a belief system. So this podcast is all about unlearning the belief system that we are not worthy or valued or that we're not enough, that we don't belong if we are not perfect. So hope is a mindset that can undo that shame or help us to bounce back from shame because it happens. Hope is something that does not just occur. We're not born with it. We learn it, right? Think about kids. Think about, some kids playing on a playground. They're playing kickball and maybe you're the kid who's up to kick, right? And maybe you've played kickball like once or twice, but you're on a team with your friends and your teachers or, other people are just cheering you on from the sidelines and you kick when the pitcher, rolls the ball towards you and you miss. Shame. Oh, look at them. They're looking at me. I'm embarrassed. I miss kicking the ball. They're probably going to think I'm a loser. I'm never going to play kickball again, right? This is a very trivial, but real example I'm using, but it translates into adulthood, things that we do. I messed up on a presentation at work. Now that I'm not going to get that promotion, right? Or I made a mistake and I reached out to this person. I wanted to ask them on a date and they rejected me. I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. Or I shared with my partner a trauma that occurred with me, and now they're not going to want to be with me anymore. They're going to think I'm damaged goods. You see where we're going? Now, that kid playing kickball has to learn the mindset of hope. See, when things are difficult or even disappointing or discouraging, we can hold on to hope by saying, I can do this. That kid can say, I can do this. I know what I want. I'm clear on that. If I kick the ball and it goes over the fence, I can run a home run. I have hope that I can do this, but I'm not only alone. I have my teammates. They're going to help me to not only run around the bases, but even maybe block the ball from the other team throwing it to third base, or my team is going to be cheering me on and rooting me on. That is hope. Hope is knowing that you can do something, but you don't have to do it alone. Really, for me, let me talk about my own personal experience with hope. Hope for me means when I can't get up to try again, because shame, disappointment, discouragement, hurt, pain, all the things, when they keep me down, when depression is beating me upside my head, and I'm laughing because that was a terrible example of what it happens, but when depression's real, and when I have one of those days, when I can't get up, hope for me means that God will come down to my level. And not only will he get down here with me, he's going to send people to stand alongside me, walk alongside me when self-doubt and defeat try to take over. My hope is in the fact that all things are working together for my good. Woo! That's my life scripture, Romans 8:28. That's my hope. So, hope helps us to build the resilience against shame so that shame does not keep us from having a wholehearted living experience. And that wholehearted living experience consists of us being courageous, being compassionate towards others and ourselves, setting some boundaries, and also being connected. I don't want to leave you all, though, with without some applicable tools to take with you. So let's go to the mental health or the life lesson portion of this podcast. Now, I have not finished Brené Brown's book, The Gift of Imperfection. That's a side note. I tend to start reading a book and I never finish. I'll get to the last 3 chapters and just not pick it up again. Anyway, the Lord's working on me. But Dr. Brené Brown shares that when we get down on ourselves, right? When we are having a difficulty picking ourselves back up, holding on or touching or grasping onto hope, when we're having difficulty being self-compassionate, she gave us an acronym or the old, what do they call it? I don't know, words. Okay. But basically she gives us some tips, and it's a checklist, and each of the statements or each of the checks on the list are with the A-E-I-O-U and sometimes Y. We know that from preschool, probably, all the vowels. So get your pen and paper really quick and say, when I'm feeling down on myself, here's a checklist of what I can do. A, ask myself, have I been absent today? Have I not been mindful? Where am I? Am I present? Am I breathing in the now? Ask yourself that. A, ask. E is whether or not you've exercised. Now let's keep it real. I am not a fan of exercise, but I do like to dance randomly. I will have a little twerk session in the mirror. I like to walk. And so exercising is not necessarily about, did I run 5 miles and lift weights for an hour? It's about, did I move my body? Right? Or are the emotions and the energy that is holding me down, is it stuck in my body? E, did I exercise? I is asking what you've done for yourself today. So I, meaning I, me. I is for, what have I done for myself today? Sometimes I think we think that it's selfish to prioritize ourselves, but I'm going to keep it real. If you don't, nobody else will. So put yourself on your calendar. Know that self-care is not selfish. It is an act of resistance, and it is a form of preservation. You deserve to be your best self on this earth, but you have to treat yourself that way. Have I done something for myself today? O now is about others and focusing on what you've done for other people. Service and kindness can really give us a sense of purpose. And so when we have the opportunity to serve others or to be kind to someone else, that warms our heart. The warm and fuzzies come in. We may feel so amazing because we are doing something for other people. The U is about interrogating whether you may be holding on to unexpressed emotions. So remember I talked about E, exercise, releasing some of that energy. Unexpressed emotions can just kind of sit in our body. Right now, I want you to relax your jaw, take your tongue off the roof of your mouth and unfurl your brows. If you had to do that just now, you are holding on to unexpressed emotions. Our body is a telltale sign of when we are holding on to things. I know when I'm feeling anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, I'm worrying, when my neck is tight, when I have a sore jaw. Sometimes I have to tell myself, Teka, stop clenching your jaw. Girl, you're going to have no teeth left when you're 65. When I feel an ache in my back, when my stomach is unsettled, all of these signs our bodies can inform us of where we're holding on to unexpressed emotions. So AEIOU is about interrogating whether you're holding on to unexpressed emotions. And sometimes why. Why is about, yeah. Why is about being grateful. It's about focusing on gratitude and something good that has happened in that particular day. It does not have to be something exaggerated or elaborate. It can just be, I'm grateful that I am breathing air. I'm grateful that I had food in the fridge for lunch. I'm grateful that I was able to talk to a friend or my parent today. Why is for, gratitude. All right. So I want to leave you with this quote. It's not even really a quote, it's a paragraph. So I'm going to be reading from Dr. Brené Brown on her website. She was celebrating in 2020, the 10-year anniversary of her book, The Gift of Imperfection, or The Gifts of Imperfection. And she wrote this on her website. She said, despite where this book will be shelved in your local bookstore, I'm not at all sure that this work is about self-help. I think of it as an invitation to join a wholehearted revolution. A small, quiet, grassroots movement that starts with each of us saying, my story matters because I matter. A movement where we can take to the streets with our messy, imperfect, wild, stretch mark, wonderful, heartbreaking, grace-filled, and joyful lives. A movement fueled by the freedom that comes when we stop pretending that everything is okay when it isn't. A call that rises up from our beliefs, a call that rises up from our bellies, when we find the courage to celebrate those intensely joyful moments, even though we've convinced ourselves that savoring happiness is inviting disaster. Revolution might sound a little dramatic, but in this world, choosing authenticity and worthiness is an absolute act of resistance. Choosing to live and love with our whole hearts is an act of defiance. You're going to confuse, piss off, and terrify lots of people, including yourself. One minute you'll pray that the transformation ends, and the next minute you'll pray that it never ends. You'll also wonder how you can feel so brave and so afraid at the same time. At least that's how I feel most of the time. Brave, afraid, and very, very alive. Embracing the gift of imperfection is not about never feeling the uncomfortable emotions. It's not about never feeling the fear, the shame, the disappointment, but it's about allowing that to coexist with bravery and to be alive. You're not alone. Your personal judgment of your inadequacies, you're not alone in that. Know that you can give yourself compassion, courageously be vulnerable, and connect with people who can say me too, who can empathize with that. You got this. All right, y'all. It's time to move along to the next segment, which we know as Gift. GIFT is an acronym. If you're new to the podcast, GIFT is an acronym. The G stands for gratitude or goal. The I stands for intention. The F is for faith or focus. And the T is for take action. It's a gratitude practice that I myself and some of my clients that I work with, and even you now, our Here We Are podcast friends, practice, if not on a daily basis, every other week with me. Try to do this on your own as often as you can and watch how it changes your mood and your mindset. My gift today, my G, is for parents that have grown to see and affirm my imperfections. It's going to be a whole nother podcast about my parents. And maybe I will have them on. But if your parents didn't always know or believe that they could embrace their imperfection, chances are they may have made you feel like you couldn't either. So I'm grateful that my parents have grown in that area and affirm my imperfections and let me know that I'm still worthy and valuable and loved. My I is to release the need for approval. I am still unlearning a lot, y'all. I may be sharing on this podcast a lot of stories, life lessons, mental health and faith nuggets, but that does not mean that I have it all figured out. I still have to release the need for approval and validation. So that's my intention. My F, my focus. Today's focus is to remember that imperfection is not about not wearing makeup or coming online crying and looking less together, quote unquote. It's about authenticity and the courage to be who I am fully and unapologetically. And T, my take action. So what I'm going to continue to do, and I want to encourage you to do this too, is reframe those comparison thoughts that come up. Know that you don't need to strive for perfection to be good enough, but that your best, what you can muster up to give, is good enough on its own. So reframe those thoughts of comparison. That's the gift. And my favorite segment, Vibe Tunes ATM. I've been having fun with this segment, y'all. If you don't know, there is a playlist on the Here We Are Pod YouTube where you can find all of the songs that myself and my guests have been sharing during this segment, Vibe Tunes ATM at the moment. Today I have 2 songs. It's just me, solo episode. So I'll give y'all 2, a little treat. My first song is called Too Sweet by India Shawn. India Shawn is an artist that I probably came across in maybe 2018. I was put onto her from another podcast called The Friend Zone. Francesca, or Hey Friend Hey, as she's known as. Francesca Medina, I think is her full name, but Hey Friend Hey is what she's known as online. She and I think Asante put me on to India Shawn, and I just love her music. I love her voice. I love the message. And Too Sweet is about being the woman that is punning a man on to how too sweet she is. She's too sweet that he can't get enough and take her love. And so I love Too Sweet by India Shawn. One of the lyrics says, "You ain't had a woman so sweet." And I love that. The next song is called Worth It by Amber Mark. Amber Mark is a young artist who her voice and her vibe kind of reminds me a mix of like Sade and maybe a little bit of Lauryn Hill with a little bit of, who else? Like Janae Aiko. Like, I like her vibe. Okay. The song Worth It is what I call affirmation music. It talks about that you're worth it. Even though you don't feel like you deserve it, know that you are worth it. So those are the 2 songs, Too Sweet by India Shawn and Worth It by Amber Mark. Check them out. I'm going to put the links in the show notes, but I'll also add the songs to our YouTube playlist, Vibe Tunes ATM. And that's it, y'all. Thank you so much for being here on the Here We Are podcast. Thank you for listening and joining again. And if you're watching on YouTube, hey, I want you to remember to connect on Instagram at the Here We Are Pod, on Facebook at Here We Are Podcast with Teka, and on YouTube at Here We Are Pod. And if you're loving the podcast, I'd be so honored if you would subscribe, of course, but also rate and review. Your rates and reviews help the podcast to get in front of those who are aligned with the message and the purpose and the mission of Here We Are, the Mindful Podcast. You want to share your story or you have some feedback for me? Feel free to send me an email, theherewearepod@gmail.com, ThehereWeare, it's a lot of E's, POD, @gmail.com. Remember that your story can also inspire and encourage others. Your story matters, even if it's imperfect. Remember to breathe in the now. Take care.